So heading into the week 9 buys, the San Francisco 49ers get to take a break as they just blew out in-division rival Los Angeles, which is a common theme for the Niners aside from in the NFC Championship game. Unfortunately, a
The
Jaworski
one that
Tart
matters.
interception is the one thing that nullifies full-on ownage over the Los Angeles Rams. But nonetheless, they are 4-4. They have a week of rest. They are a game behind in the division, behind a Seahawks team that they do have a victory over. And if you were to break down in division, they are 3-0. So that's all positive things for the Niners. However, they didn't think they'd find themselves in a 4-4 struggle through the first 8 weeks of the season. What are your early thoughts on the Niners as they head into the bye?
In an NFC that only has one great team, the 49ers might be the next closest thing to that. And San Francisco's defense has suffered an unholy amount of injuries so far this season, and they have still continued to be excellent because they have not just great players and Pro Bowlers all over the place, but incredible depth. It's quite amazing what the 49ers have been able to pull off. And I think that San Francisco's offense is capable. I'm interested to see what Christian McCaffrey adds as an element to that team. We finally saw George Kittle get a touchdown last week. He finally looked like a receiver more than the blocking tight end that we're used to. I think first time since week 14 of last year that we were really wowed by a George Kittle performance. So it's interesting to see what San Francisco builds this thing into, but I am still of the camp that they might be the second best team in the NFC in that group right there with Minnesota and Dallas, where matchups are going to be incredibly interesting come playoff time. I don't know if San Francisco will separate themselves, but in a sport where the Eagles are the only great team in that conference, I think the 49ers are right there. And as we talked about in our previous video about the Eagles, I would love to watch the 49ers defense match up against that Philadelphia offense.
You mentioned the injuries they suffered on defense. One of the reasons that this bye couldn't have come at a perfect time is that the fact that the Niners are going to get healthy when they come back from this bye week. They have Jason Verrett expected to come back off injury. They have Arik Armstead expected to come back off injury. They have Elijah Mitchell expected to come back to this team. Dre Greenlaw was nursing an injury. Azeez Al-Shaair should be back anytime soon, so that's going to improve their linebacking core. Charvarius Ward, Mooney Ward, who was nursing a groin injury, has another opportunity to let that heal up a little bit more. Same goes for a guy like Trent Williams, who was playing through the after effect of a high ankle sprain. Still played well, still played at a high level, but now he gets an opportunity to rest that a little bit more. And other guys that are nursing injuries now get a chance to just let that breathe. Deebo Samuel, who didn't even play against the Rams, had a hamstring injury going into that game. Deebo Samuel, you add him back into this offense. So you mentioned the Christian McCaffrey element. We saw the best version of the Christian McCaffrey element against the Rams. You had a rushing touchdown, a passing touchdown, and a receiving touchdown, which is the first time that's happened since 2005 with Danian Tomlinson. And you think about what Christian McCaffrey is, or people that he gets compared to, LT Christian McCaffrey comp is an appropriate comp in the history of the NFL game. Christian McCaffrey was doing everything for them. Now, with the inclusion of Deebo Samuel back into this offense, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, and CMC, he's not expected to do everything. Get Elijah Mitchell back. That's another back that could complement you. Yes, you just traded away Jeff Wilson Jr., but add Elijah Mitchell back to this backfield, and you can spare Christian McCaffrey some reps that might be more grueling on his body. We've talked about a guy with an injury history. You try and limit Christian McCaffrey as much as you can. There's a sequence in the last game that I was screaming at Kyle Shanahan for with Christian McCaffrey because you're already up by like 20 points. Why is Christian McCaffrey taking bullshit carries up the middle into traffic? I was a little bit pissed at Kyle for that one. Those were easily 3 carries you could have gave to Jeff Wilson Jr. as you're about to trade him off to the Dolphins. But nonetheless, we move on. We move to another week. Kyle Shanahan, an interesting quote in this last press conference, got to the podium. I have no injuries report. That's weird. That's kind of awkward. And it is kind of awkward because that has been the overlying storyline on this Niners team this entire season. Haven't really hit them too hard offensively, aside from you look at what happened to Trey Lance, and still a variable that we'll never really have an answer to this season, that we'll just have to wait till next season to figure out. But Jimmy Garoppolo has been playing well. Some will argue this is his best season statistically. Some will argue this is his worst season It really depends
Well, it's
on
not
where
his worst. It's not his worst. I will say that.
There
It's
is
not his
some in
worst.
Bay Area Twitter that have been arguing that Jimmy Garoppolo has been playing awful, worse than replacement level. And no, you look at the numbers, I think he's 11 touchdowns and 4 interceptions on the year. There's a handful of teams right now that would be begging for that out of their quarterback situation. The Niners, for having their starting quarterback go down in the year, couldn't have had any softer landing spot. They bet on crypto, but they had a safety blanket, and that was Jimmy Garoppolo, and they had a soft landing because of it. Now you go into this next part of the schedule. You start looking at the games they got after the bye week. They face the Chargers. That's an opportunity to get to 5-4. They have another game against the Raiders coming up. The Raiders are kind of imploding. You know, the Bucks matchup, which looked a lot more daunting early on, that's coming up. They have places in their schedule that you think that they could continue start building more momentum coming off of this bye
Saints
week.
look pretty good, right? Saints are looking
The
pretty good at this
Saints,
point.
but it's just not getting ahead of ourselves either because, well, you got those 2 Cardinals games. The Cardinals are starting to trend in a positive direction now that they got DeAndre Hopkins back. You lose the games to the Bears, you lose the games to the Falcons, and you start to ask yourselves, can we go into any game and just automatically chalk ourselves up as the favorites? The Rams are a unique circumstance because the Rams are someone that you respect as an opponent, but yet you also understand that you match up well against them. So even though you swept them this year, I'm trying to not get too high on my expectations coming off of that victory against Los Angeles, because we talked about it in another video, but Los Angeles is a flawed team. That is a flawed roster, and the Niners were more than happy to take advantage of it. And we'll see if they can continue to do that against other flawed rosters, other flawed teams coming up on their schedule. You have the better team most weeks. Offensively, you look at the offensive skill weapons, you might have the best offensive skill weapons on a pound for pound basis in the league. You look at the combination of players, how many other teams have better combined offensive skill weapons than the Niners?
Yeah, 75% of the time you should be favored in the matchup that you're playing, regardless of whether it's home or away. 75% of the time you should be a favorite in those games based on where the 49ers are. It's just what happens when they play those 6 or 7 teams where it's not as much of a guarantee is interesting. One point that you brought up about Christian McCaffrey and like maybe they'll start using him less in the offense per se. So against the Rams, the 49ers ran 50 offensive plays, or I should say 50 plays that ended in a net positive. So like not a sack or not a penalty. 50 offensive plays. 27 of them were through Christian McCaffrey. It was 18 runs and 9 targets. You can count the 1 pass play in there as well that he threw on the trick play if you want. But for the sake of this conversation, let's say 54%, 27 out of 50 plays. Only Derrick Henry for the Titans at 57% had a higher usage percentage last week than Christian McCaffrey did, which you could argue that that's an anomaly. They didn't have certain players healthy, such as Elijah Mitchell, or you could say this is the type of offense they're trying to build to. We need a larger sample size to know that answer, but it was interesting to watch that be the strategy in the first week.
My theory on that was with Deebo out, because I feel as though Christian McCaffrey essentially took over what Deebo was doing for you, and particularly in the matchup against the Rams, because we look at the Deebo game plan from last year, and it was pretty much what Christian McCaffrey was giving them this year in that Rams matchup. Even down to the trick play, it was pretty much the same trick play that they dialed up for Deebo to throw a passing touchdown to Juwan Jennings last year. Just have Christian McCaffrey do it a little bit cleaner. Brandon Ayuk comes down with it clean. And you look at Brandon Ayuk's numbers the last 3 weeks, you really do have something special in Brandon Ayuk in developing into a number 1 wide receiver. With Deebo, I'm intrigued to see how he gets utilized moving forward. And you have to figure Deebo is going to take some of the work out of the backfield. So you're also going to have really a backfield rotation of Christian McCaffrey, Elijah Mitchell, and Deebo Samuel. Maybe Deebo only takes 3 to 5 carries opposed to the tail end of last season where it seemed like he was rushing the ball close to 10 times like a traditional running back. Now that you have a legitimate all-star, all-pro level running back in Christian McCaffrey.
Well, it makes sense why they traded for McCaffrey, right? If they want to do these things with Deebo Samuel, you might as well get Christian McCaffrey, who's better and more better positioned to, run that type of play. It's going to make it easier.
Too, and adding a confidence element to your quarterback. So we talked about the benefits of adding a Christian McCaffrey to the Niners offense, and Jimmy Garoppolo. We're honest about what he is and what he isn't. You're maybe a little bit more critical of him than I am, but I think that Jimmy Garoppolo has more upside than other quarterbacks that fall in that tier 3. We can agree that he's a tier 3 quarterback, and yet I can tell you that his ceiling on like a given week could put him in tier 2, which is something that a lot of the tier 3 quarterbacks don't really have. A lot of the tier 3 quarterbacks kind of cruise control at tier 3 and never really ascend to anything more at times. With Christian McCaffrey, one thing that I thought that was essential in that game against the Rams is he was that nice little underneath safety blanket for Jimmy Garoppolo. When Jimmy Garoppolo was throwing to him, it just felt with a certain level of confidence. We go back to his receiving touchdown where he stretches out for it. Jimmy Garoppolo buys time, rolls out of the pocket, looks. Oh, wait, there's Christian McCaffrey. And he has the confidence to throw to that guy. And that's maybe adding in what type of athlete the Christian McCaffrey is, that he's a capable wide receiver out there playing the running back position. Building that confidence for your quarterback and getting a playmaker like Christian McCaffrey is something that the Niners could build on. And if you're Kyle Shanahan, and I'm going to hold off on calling Kyle a genius like so often people do when talking about him, but I will give him the credit that he is a creative playmaker at times. Well, you have the type of pieces that you can get creative with now. There's no player in the NFL quite like Christian McCaffrey. There's no player quite like Deebo Samuel, and there's no player quite like George Kittle. They're all unicorns in respective ways at their position.
Well,
you have three.
I think Kittle used to be. I'm not so sure about Kittle anymore, but yes, I think
just because we haven't seen him make the type of plays that he was making in 2018, the one-handed breakaway 80-yard touchdowns. I don't think that that's not still available. I think they've just had to use him more as a blocker because of the deficiencies that they have on the offensive line, particularly at the right tackle position. Mike McGlinchey continues to be a huge problem that the Niners will have to address. I know they already didn't pick up the 5th-year option. They already don't feel great about Mike McGlinchey as a whole, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of other alternatives at the right tackle position or a lot of recourse for the Niners who don't have a high round draft pick to really use on that position. They just kind of have to make do with a guy that will occasionally just let an edge defender just run past him. It's crazy. He sets. He set ready to block no one. Thin air. And meanwhile, the defender just free shot at Jimmy Garoppolo. And maybe that's scheming. Maybe there was a miscommunication of the offensive line. Well, I mean, maybe
scheming. That's a dude messing up.
Well, I was going to give him a little bit of an excuse, and maybe there was a miscommunication on the play. He was thinking the play was going to be built towards somewhere else. He's just looking in the wrong direction entirely. Well, the defender that's what I mean by that. But either way,
that's great.
Nonetheless, Mike McGlinchey is a problem for them on the right tackle position. And that's my one hole on the Niners offense that I could really pick apart, because Jimmy Garoppolo, again, it's going to be an easy target for a lot of people when they talk about the shortcomings of this offense. The right tackle position is more concerning to me.
So for Garoppolo, I said at the start of the season, I said with Trey Lance, if Trey Lance gives you rookie year Baker Mayfield numbers, which is 65% completion percentage, 28 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions, if he gives you that, you're going to be a Super Bowl contender, but you're expecting that he'll build into something more, or you come in and you're amazed by how great Trey Lance plays. Jimmy Garoppolo, if you take away the 2 games to start the season, so you shrink the sample size a little bit, that would be basically you need 24 touchdowns, 12 interceptions is what you need from Garoppolo, and complete 65% of your passes. Well, so far this year, Garoppolo has completed 66% of his passes, is on pace to finish the season with 26 touchdowns, and is on pace to finish the season with 10 interceptions. So he's playing slightly better than the numbers that I set out for Trey Lance in order to have the 49ers become a Super Bowl caliber team, as long as their defense is healthy. And now that you add Christian McCaffrey, the math changes on that offense. I see no evidence that says San Francisco can't be a very, very good team, even with the deficiencies on the right side of the offensive line. Money might be able to solve that one in the offseason. I'm not sure, but money might be able to solve that one a little bit. But the 49ers might have deficiencies there. And I know we talked about 2019 Kittle and 2018 Kittle, but like even last year before the injury, I saw Kittle have a 2-game stretch where he had 23 catches for 237 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Well,
And
okay,
it just hasn't been that
there
in
was the
14
game.
games.
See, I think it's just more so you got to consider this. When you add all these offensive pieces, you have to diversify where those targets go. And the Niners know that they have something special with Kittle as a blocker. You're going to use that as a strength of your offense. You know, if you can use him and Kyle Juszczyk to get out in front of people, and as fun as it would be to see George Kittle catch 10 receptions a game, you have 25 attempts passing a game, right? You're going to see 8 to 10 of those go to Ayuk. You're probably going to see close to that same amount go to Deebo. And then the pie gets reduced for a guy like George Kittle. If George Kittle was playing in the Chiefs offense, for argument's sake, he would probably be putting up numbers more in line with what you would like from like someone of his ability. It's just the way that he's schemed in this offense.
You are correct. It's just the thing that made George Kittle special. Because the reason I brought that up is because you were talking about like McCaffrey is special, Deebo Samuel is special, Trent Williams is special, Kittle is special. The thing that made Kittle special was his ability to catch and block at top levels. And that's why he's going to probably make the Hall of Fame. If he's doing only one of those things, it just makes him less special and less valuable.
Here's the thing. If you're an opposing defensive coordinator, you still have to plan around George Kittle as if he can burn you on one of those deep posts or those large crossing routes or those play actions downfield. So the fact that you still have to plan for him because the ability is still there is the type of stuff that keeps defensive coordinators up at night. Now that you have to factor in Christian McCaffrey with George Kittle, with Deebo Samuel, with Brandon Ayuk, that's a problem. I don't care if you're Bill Parcells, right? Bill Belichick. You still can only, and part of those guys, part of their genius is we're going to take away the best player on your opposing team, right? Well, that's a bit harder to do when you can argue that there's 4 best players on the San Francisco 49ers team.
And that's why the 49ers are a very good team so far this year, because they're built on an elite defense and have a very, very capable offense. The only argument I have to Kittle is that it makes him not special. It makes him very good. It just makes him not special if he doesn't have the ball in his hands. And I know you don't have to get the ball in your hands to make an impact, but the thing that made George Kittle a Hall of Famer is that he was able to do both at very high levels in the past.
See, eventually we're getting to the point where the PFF guys are in charge of the Hall of Fame, and we'll just have George Kittle in there anyway because he's going to
George Kittle should make the Hall of Fame. I'm not against that. George Kittle absolutely should have a case for making the Hall of Fame, even based on the short career that he's had. So, I mean, the short career of being elite, like 5 years is the peak of George Kittle's career. But
and I hate to say it might be a short career in general, just given the injuries.
Yeah, but I mean, if he plays 10 seasons, I think we could be having a talk about George Kittle in the Hall of Fame. I don't think it's out of the question, but I just think it makes him less valuable the way that the 49ers are using him, which isn't a bad thing. Like, he's still a very good player. It just means the 49ers aren't going to have an elite offense.
He's not going to be the guy that fills up the counting stats. And that will just be one of those things that we'll have to have a different way of evaluating, because the pancake blocks aren't going to be evaluated in the same way that the 80-yard touchdowns are going to be evaluated.
But it's not like he's adding new value in the blocking. He's just doing the thing he was always great at.
There was a stat, though, that the Niners were averaging 7 yards per rush on rushes designed to George Kittle's side of the field. So when you factor in that stuff, and that's kind of a math that kind of is hard to really quantify.
Blocking is difficult to quantify. You are correct.
that all still adds to a special player, and an offense that, again, is just ultimately hard to game plan against. The Niners are set up well. They're set up where I'm going to say they're not set up where they want to be. Where they want to be is probably something more like a 5-3.
But if you flip the Bears result, then they're 5-3, and it looks a lot better.
The problem is we can't do that. We can't flip the Bears result. The Bears result is what the Bears result was. You lost by double-digit touchdowns, and you have to deal with that and the repercussions of that early season loss. This Niners team, they're progressing into the second half of the season. What do you expect from them? Where do you think they rank in the current NFC? Where do you think they rank against the Eagles? That's going to be a matchup that we're going to keep our eyes on in the season second half. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on all our social medias, and stay safe, happy, and healthy. From Ju-Ju and Kyle Ledbetter, we will see you next time.